Hi again, everyone. Welcome back to another conversation on the Search Pilot channel. My name is Will Critchlow, founder and CEO at Search Pilot, and I'm excited to be joined today by Paddy Moogan. Paddy and I go way back. We worked together over a decade ago when Paddy worked his way up to running the UK operations of Distilled, the agency that I founded way back when. And he then has gone on to all kinds of exciting things. He founded his own agency, Era, and these days, fingers in many pies, but the hat I think that he's wearing that is particularly relevant to the conversation we're going to have today is that he's running an organization called Founder Focus, where he is helping agency founders navigate those tricky stages of agency life. Both of us know that it's not the easiest journey, but it's a very rewarding one. And I think that having somebody who's been there, done that, and has the scars is extremely useful and valuable to all those folks. So, Paddy, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I think 16 years ago we first met, and I had hair at the time. So that was the agency life that I've had since then.
Yeah, mine was a bit less grey. So, what we're going to talk about today, there's a kind of couple of different things, but what we're bringing together, I think, is from that agency background, and particularly you've done a lot of this thinking both for your own agency, but now in the work that you're doing with a wide range of agencies. We want to bring some insights that we hope are useful to people running SEO and digital marketing operations in-house at brands. And the work we do at Search Pilot these days is heavily focused on working with those teams, particularly at large retailers and e-commerce sites. And you and I have a bit of the shared background, but you've certainly gone much, much deeper into what agencies are bringing to that mix and what they're good at, what they're still good for, what's changing in, I'm sure we'll get onto AI and everything else. And so, I'm kind of hopeful that we can bring some insights that are valuable to the in-house folks from those experiences. So maybe that's the best place to start. But what's your view on what does it make most sense to keep as an in-house function, and when are you thinking that people should be bringing agencies in?
It's a good place to start. So I think I'd probably start with a quite broad opinion, which goes a bit counter to 20 years of my career so far, which is I don't actually think that brands should default to agencies. Like, I think in an ideal world, I don't think agencies should really be needed that much. Like, I don't think ideally brands should be reliant upon agencies, despite having worked for yours, run my own, work with many now. This might sound a bit backwards, but I think ideally, if I was working in-house, I'd want to be able to keep as much in-house as possible. So I think as a broad statement and a broad opinion, I feel like in-house teams should really try and look inwards first before defaulting to agencies, because I have definitely seen situations where it's felt like someone's come in and they want to bring in agencies or a single agency, and it kind of feels like they're doing it because that's how they've done things previously. Well, I've definitely benefited from that scenario where my agency was the one being brought in. I've lost in that scenario where I've been the one being kicked out, but sometimes it does often feel like the default answer is, well, we need an agency for SEO, PPC, content, wherever it may be. So I think broadly, I would say to in-house folks to not default to that immediately. But if you are going to use agencies, I think particularly now, in the last couple of years, the biggest value that I see them consistently bringing is, I guess I call it decision confidence a lot of the time. So kind of helping make big decisions, making big calls, and kind of lending that context, that wider experience of having probably dozens of clients across different industries, bringing that to the conversation. I think that's one of the biggest areas for me that agencies continue and probably will continue, to be honest, to add value. Aside from, there's tactical stuff, we can probably get onto that, but for me, primarily, I guess an agency having your back when you're making really, really big calls and sitting around that big table with you, that to me is one of the most valuable things an agency can do, because you can't always get that in-house. If you're a CMO, I guess it can feel a bit lonely sometimes if you're the one having to make that decision at that kind of level. So I think having an agency there to back you up and help you make that call is one of the most valuable things that agencies do.
I think, lonely, but also kind of by definition hard to get the breadth of up-to-date experience. You're kind of by definition, you're working on the one site or the one portfolio of sites. That makes me think of something that, going all the way back to the beginning of us working together, we used to call it consulting. And I kind of just got over the hang-ups of, were we a consultancy or were we an agency? But some people have very strong opinions that those are different things. I think a lot of the value you're pointing to there is more in the realm of what I've always thought of as the consulting side. So your role as the outside person, your consultant or agency member is your expertise. It's your breadth of experience. It's your knowledge, and maybe some specialist kind of approaches, frameworks, whatever else it might be. But that's kind of fundamentally what you're doing there, and that's what you're imparting.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of like I kind of do it now with the agencies who I work with. I consult, and I think it applies to agencies that work with brands as well, where you're kind of saying, look, I've got this decision to make, I've got this strategy that I want to implement. You can kind of say to the agency, well, what's your experience with this scenario? And the agency can go, okay, cool, here's what we did for this client, here's what we did for this client, all those kind of conversations. And they can also say, well, here's what worked, here's what didn't work, here's how we can help you get to the right outcome for you. And it is a consultative approach, but I think, bringing that context of, oh yeah, we've done this before, here's what kind of happened. Random example that comes to mind is more technical, but salt migrations, right? Salt migrations technically aren't that difficult or complicated. The process is fairly simple and straightforward, but we've all had them go wrong for the most obscure of reasons. Sometimes you want someone who's done 20 of them to be like, oh, watch out for this, watch out for that. And I think that's where that experience comes in, and you're not necessarily doing stuff there, you're not getting too hands-on, but you're just kind of giving that advice, that consultancy. And with the agency side of it, that's, I guess, if you want to get technical about the difference, is like, it's more of a doer, but you're literally just paying someone to do something. That definitely has value in certain ways, but for me, that is that's a bit more questionable, a bit more at risk in the future as well for agencies, I believe, and definitely something that brands should probably try and keep to themselves and keep in-house if possible.
Yeah, I've been speaking to a few people who've made the journey. It was a very common journey that neither you nor I took, which is the agency then going in-house route. And I think a lot of them look back on that early stage of their career in the agency role as just being the time they just learnt so much. The absolute kind of deluge fire hose of information, which I definitely do relate to, and I know you do as well. But it is, in this kind of world of changing roles and responsibilities, it is not always easy to get the depth of experience that you need to be an effective consultant in that kind. You're useful if you have done or seen 20 site migrations, like you say, and obviously nobody has on day one. And so that role of the junior, and I think that's the kind of existential thing that I think probably most about is, where do the talented mid-level people of tomorrow come from if the junior work is getting hollowed out either by AI or just by budget and whatever else. We can get deeper into that, but I don't know if you've got immediate experience.
Randomly, I was speaking to a COO at an agency in New York last week about this exact problem, and where we went through that conversation was the idea that if you're a junior person coming into the workplace, you are under threat more than people with bags of experience, obviously. But also, those more junior people coming into the workplace, I don't know if they're quite AI native yet, but I think they will be soon, or AI first.
Some of them certainly will be, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, and this will be like kind of, they just know how it works, they understand it from day one, and I feel that has value. That in itself means that they're more than just a doer of tasks. They don't just do a tech audit or a site migration, they do more than that. So I feel like those kinds of people coming through, I think, have huge value, and maybe they're the ones that are going to become the mid-level and senior people. But I think if you're not embracing that world, the value, I think, gets lost very easily, unless you're an absolute superstar that just immediately can walk into a boardroom or, you know what I mean, have that conversation with a client very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, that's interesting because I was talking to our newest hire who was born after I left university, and not we haven't quite yet hired anybody who was born after we started Distilled, but I'm sure that's going to be not long.
It's coming.
Because I guess they're 21 now. So anyway, literally just onboarding this new team member, and he was asking about some of those experiences I had during the .com boom. And I mean, he didn't call it that because he didn't know it was called that, but you know, the early days of the internet and the web. And I was saying that actually what we're seeing today with AI is the thing that most reminds me of that mid to late 90s, kind of I remember randomly it was a chemistry teacher who was the first person at my school to have an internet connection in the classroom. One computer on dial-up in 94 or something, and he was just a geek. He was just into it. Like, it wasn't an official thing. It was just he was the first one who'd happened to do that. None of us had internet at home at that point, and you could just start to see the very first kind of, oh, maybe this thing is going to be useful. And I think we're past the 94 point now. We're probably more like the 98, and I was the first generation to have email as the primary communication with my university. So they when I arrived, they said, we're not going to be sending you paper letters for everything that the university needs to tell you. You're just going to get emails. And we were the first year that did that. So it was kind of being used for real stuff. But like on that journey in between those times, I remember my co-founder Duncan, who obviously you know well, and we were swapping floppy disks back and forth with messages on them before we had email at home. We were, again, before track changes, we were trying to like collaborate on documents where we would send different versions of Word documents back and forth on these floppies. And then when we were working in the same physical place, we were trying to set up a local network. It still wasn't connected to the outside world, but you could swap things across I feel like it was like a serial cable or something. It was some kind of crazy way of networking computers together. And it was just so obvious that these things were changing the world of work. And I'd done my work experience in a magistrate's court, and desks in 94, 95 didn't have computers on them. There were still typewriters. They were still doing stuff in triplicate on physical carbon copy paper and so forth. And that thing you just described of, I had that feeling like I'm going to come into the workplace as the first generation that actually, as a teenager, had grown up around that stuff. And I have been drawing the parallel between that time and today a lot in my head of like trying to predict what's going to happen to the world of business. But I hadn't thought about it I hadn't quite empathized with like, those AI native kids must be looking at us going, I can disrupt that. I can come in and be useful and valuable.
Yeah, it's that confidence I think you would walk into an interview with. And to be fair, this applies, I'm coming at it from an agency angle, but this applies to in-house roles as well, right? Mm-hmm. If you're going to hire juniors into in-house companies, if someone could sit there in an interview and demonstrate real competence and smarts around Claude, ChatGPT, whatever it is they use, that's good, that's impressive. Mm-hmm. I guess knowing how to stand out is a bit more difficult potentially, because those tools are capable of so many things, but you would be looking for the thinking behind it and just the logic. And actually, I remember going back to when my interview with Distilled back in 2010, mm-hmm. I remember it so well, where I was asked to map out a site architecture, and it wasn't about the architecture, it was about the thinking and me kind of talking through it and kind of showing how I got to the answer. So if that was with a whiteboard, so now 16 years later, that would be okay. Sit down with Claude, put it on the screen, show me how you're going to solve a problem or something like that. You'd be looking for someone to have the intuition, the smarts to actually use it effectively. Because as we know, like, the problem with AI is, a friend of mine said last week, you can use it to cook an amazing meal or burn your house down. It's like, well, yeah, pretty much. So you need to demonstrate that you know how to use it, and that is a skill, And I mm-hmm. think that, ironically as well, I think the people that are actually good communicators with other people have also got an advantage here as well, because you do have to talk to it like a intern who knows nothing sometimes knows, and knowing how to do that is actually
Well,
really
actually,
important.
relevant to another of your ventures, I think you have to talk to it like a manager, and you actually need to manage it. And
Yeah.
I did see a kind of spoof thing that was, much like the meme of what guys will do to avoid going to therapy. There was a similar concept of what Silicon Valley tech workers will do to avoid having to manage a human. But the same person who might delegate to a human with a one line, hey, can you do the site audit, will happily write 5 pages of context window prompt engineering for their AI model to get it right. And
Yeah.
I found that quite amusing and interesting to watch.
And go back and forth on it as well, rather than just be like, there you go. Like, they'll figure it out and have more patience technically. But I guess going back to what we were talking about coming into the workplace, like, yeah, I think there is a concern, but I am a bit worried, but I'm not overly worried. And I think generally, we're still figuring this stuff out. We're still figuring out where these tools sit in what we do day to day, and I think we've got a little bit of time yet before we know some of those answers. So for foreseeable, I'm not worried, but I do think that it just puts a different emphasis on the skills that you're looking for with people coming into the workplace, whether it's in-house or agency.
Yeah, for sure. And that attitude and that agency and in the other definition, the agency in the sense of believing that you can change the world, or you can shape things to your desires. Because that's the other archetype that I think is happening a lot, is the people I've seen be most immediately quickly comfortable with the bleeding edge of prompting AI to do stuff are actually founders. And I think, again, that's because they've been used to the idea that you are going to create some change in the world by talking and by asking other people to do things. And it is, so it's kind of interesting at both ends, isn't it? You've got the kind of the AI native kids coming through the system, and you've got the people who are like, this is a thing I've seen before, but I've seen it with asking humans or teams of humans to do things, and now it's changing to be the machines.
And actually with that, I feel like part of the reason that founders, I think, engage in the way they do, and for me personally, is because it feels so much quicker to, like, you've done similar things in the past and made changes and put systems in place, built companies. When you're using AI to do it, you're like, oh wow, if I had this built in my company 10, 20 years ago, how much quicker could I have gone? I think it kind of ignites that, I don't know, that passion, that curiosity again. Like, I think that's what it's done for me. And you kind of recognise that, oh wow, if I'd had this previously, so you can't help but get excited by it and figure out how to use it effectively, because you realise just how good it is.
So many analogies. I remember, like, again, you'll remember building file servers in the office, and then Dropbox comes along, or running your own email server, and then suddenly Gmail is there, or whatever else it might be, and just that kind of compounding. This is or AWS. This is easier. We don't have to, rack our own servers or whatever it might be. Something else you said there struck a chord with me, which is I don't remember if you ever met my mentor Richard Denny. That's his book. That one there.
No, I've read
died a couple of years ago, unfortunately. But he, I wrote about and I know that we talked about him, and he was a sales guy basically. So he specialised in all kinds of sales stories, which I could tell, but I'm not going to bore everyone with today. But one of the things he used to talk about was in the picking up the phone side of sales. He always used to suggest calling at 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, or 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night to the office, because you're most likely to get the MD or the founder personally picking up the phone. And that I think there's also something about that with the AI, is that there's lots of things that we don't want to bother our team with out of hours. That we obviously there's no qualms about prompting the robot to do something out of its working hours. In fact, Claude is encouraging this. I just saw they're offering 2x tokens outside of working hours, presumably because electricity is cheaper at those times. And that is that speed of iteration. So not necessarily that the task is quicker, but the elapsed time is quicker. and we've noticed this with, again, to bring it vaguely back to the agency kind of conversation. I've noticed it when, for example, if I want to understand what something means in a contract, the fact that Gemini can tell me straight away, rather than an email to the lawyer who at best case is going to reply in a couple of hours, it's a context switch. And the fact that there's less of that context switching, it's also what I think makes it exhausting, is you kind of feel like you're always on and you could always be productive. And if you don't have 5 open claws doing your work at every moment, then are you really even trying? And I think people, I don't know, I'm hearing all kinds of disquiet on all sides of that.
Yeah, I don't mind admitting it, pretty obsessed with Claude Code, Claude Co-work in the last month or so, and it feels like what feels like spare time that I have, open my laptop and just not even do something, just play with it, just try and optimize it, do something with it, and that's nice, that's cool. But yeah, you can run away with it, but also yes, you can't do that with your team. You can't. I've got an idea, I'm going to text them. That's not really what you should be doing.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next phase, because there's so many rabbit holes we could go down there. But you alluded to something in the intro bit where you were talking about being on the winning and losing side of being brought in by change of personnel or whatever. And obviously we've both experienced this. And in fact, I had Will Reynolds in this conversation a few weeks ago. And we were talking about times when he won deals from us and vice versa. But there's something about that kind of power dynamic, I think, when we're thinking about an agency brand relationship, that it's connected to, it's person to person, not necessarily business to business. We've all had the case where the point of either the point of contact or the senior executive sponsor changes. And as you say, it's like immediate assumption that they're changing agency. Yeah. You've now seen that across a lot more agencies. What are you seeing? What are you thinking? What are you feeling about all of that?
I think it's one of those things that you, as an agency owner, first and foremost, or as a team, you kind of have to accept it's kind of part of the game. It happens, and I think when it's happened in the past to me at Era, I remember very well back in 2023, we had 2 big clients and both of them had CMO, VP of marketing changes in and around the same time. And I said to one of my directors at the time, okay, we're going to lose one. Like, let's pick one. Whichever one we're going to try and go all in on. Like, still try and work on both, but let's forecast we're going to lose one of them. So there is like an acceptance of it, I think, which I think is healthy. I think you need to accept it as part of agency life. I think on the brand side, though, and in-house side, that power dynamic is interesting because you can come in and kind of bring an agency with you. You may want to, you've probably got a strategy in mind you want to implement and you want to kind of have a fresh start, and that's all well and good. But I do think that sometimes the existing incumbent can still execute on those things. So I think I wouldn't jump too quickly to, I need to bring in people who I know, because one of those examples that I spoke about with Era, we'd been with that client for about 3 years or so at that point and did almost everything for them. So it was one of those ones, we did lose it in the end, but we were doing such a good job on it. It was one of those was like, look, this is the wrong decision to get rid of us. Like, it just shouldn't. Does not
shouldn't work that way.
Sense. Yeah, so I think that power dynamic can kind of influence that, and someone just wants a fresh start. Equally, I think generally with the power dynamics of bringing in another agency, I think again, speaking to in-house people here, like, you're bringing the agency with you, but that can make them feel special. It's a good thing, it means they've done good work in the past, but also what it can do is make them think, oh, we've got this, and they almost don't have to try as hard. And they probably do work hard, I'm not saying they ease off too much, but you can get a bit too comfortable sometimes. I won't mention who it was, but back at Distilled, I think we had one client who took us to 3 or 4 different brands that they worked with, and we probably got a bit comfortable with that. Like, we still did really, really good work, but I think sometimes if you're on the brand side, you just have to remember that this is a brand new client, brand new industry. Treat the agency as such, because the power dynamic can shift towards the agency a little bit if they're a bit, oh, we've got this, we'll just do what we did last time, and that may not be the right answer.
I was going to say, I feel like thinking about it from the brand side as well, that probably a very common complaint that we've heard. I mean, we've heard it when people have moved from another agency to us, and every agency has heard it with clients on the way out of the door as well. It is those ways that the relationship goes stale, or somebody feels like the best work isn't being done, or the best people aren't on the account, or any of those kinds of things. What have you seen works really well from the brand side to make sure that they continue getting the best out of an agency for the long haul?
Definitely watching for the 6 month point. Like there's nearly always a plateau around month 5, month 6, for a couple of reasons. I mean, most agencies, most good ones out the gate, will do a very, very good job in the first 2, 3, 4 months or so. So I think if I was in-house, I'd expect that to happen. But then I wouldn't ease off after that point. I would keep pushing and push through that point where it's, when you kind of, things become normalised a little bit. You've had a few monthly catch-ups at that point. You've probably had a couple of quarterly reviews. And I think the agency, that's when things can start to feel a bit settled, and like recurring meetings are probably the enemy here a little bit because they make you feel comfortable. So I think from the in-house side, I would definitely advocate for just freshening things up a little bit, however that may look, and making sure the agency is continually like looking at the account in a fresh way. So normally what happens is after 6 months, you get into the rhythm where you're just doing very similar things over and over again. It might look different, but it's the same stuff. I would still be challenging the agency to be inputting on other things you've got going on, or freshening things up wherever they can. You don't need to kind of reinvent the wheel all the time, but I guess ultimately just keep them on their toes. Agencies won't thank me for that, but if I was working in-house, you have to almost constantly be thinking about the fact that this agency has dozens of other clients potentially. They are going to split their time appropriately. You have to do your best to try and keep things fresh on your side. And I think that it's that classic problem where we want so many clients at error where they came to us and said, yeah, the agency just stopped being proactive. So common. And I'm sure we've fell into that trap as well. But it's so easy for agencies to do that I think in-house folks can play a part in stopping that from happening, whereas I think a lot of them assume it's all on the agency to stop that from happening, and I think it's more of a split responsibility, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's interesting, actually. You say that agencies won't thank you, but I think actually good relationships with good agencies do actually include that kind of, it's high expectations, high accountability, as you say, innovation, and looking for what's no longer serving us. How should we evolve? What are we doing next week, next month, next year? We always used to try and have that longer run roadmap in place, so that you're not just thinking week to week or even month to month, but have that kind of plan further out. And I think the best, longest relationships we had were some of the more challenging ones. And I think I obviously think about this a lot running the SaaS business dynamic these days. And one of the things that is written much more about on that side, actually, and I don't remember reading as much about in the agency side, but definitely applies, is the account that's coasting is more at risk than the account that's complaining, because the account that's complaining still cares. And you again, not to turn it into a therapy session or whatever else, but I'm certainly about as far away from a therapist as it's possible to be, but. You see similar things in relationships or wherever else, that when things they become irretrievable at the point of just disillusionment and not caring anymore. And actually those moments of kind of complaint or those spiky kind of interactions, it's still, you still care at that point.
Yeah, and you're right, like the fact that the client is maybe complaining or raising a concern, it shows they care, they give a shit, they do. And I think both sides have to show that at different points. And I think part of the struggle here for agencies, but also I think in-house people, is those things are very, very intangible. I think a lot of the time, you have the work you have to do, right? The scope of work, the deliverables, that's all fine. I've always said that doing those very well will probably get you through the first 12 months of a relationship. after that point, I think the emphasis becomes more on the relationship itself and those little softer moments. So, for example, randomly emailing a client to be like, oh, hey, I was thinking about you when I read this article. Those kind of little moments that show the client that you're thinking about them, those become more important over time. And from the in-house perspective, I think, again, the emphasis, I think, is just as much on them to be bringing the agency on that journey and not letting them fall into the recurring cycle. And
the kind of service provider trap, in a sense. Yeah,
like still, and I guess that comes down to the way you value them. Like the agency, they feel it if you just see them as a supplier, as a doer, just churn out tasks, churn out reports. And some agencies are fine with that. That's how they're set up. Other ones who want to help more, it's a bit disheartening where you kind of feel like you're pushed to the side a little bit and you're not really part of the decision making, or you're not part of the planning or the strategy. So I think, again, advice for in-house folks would be that you want to bring them with you and not kind of accidentally push them to one side, because once you've done that, they feel it, they see it, and they're more likely to disengage at that point, I think.
Yeah, it's been quite an interesting journey for us at SearchPilot, because I think classic greatest strength is greatest weakness type things, we come from that service provider, agency consulting background, which has led to us being unafraid of enterprise contracts in ways that I think a lot of developers and software people are not kind of ready for or able to get their head around custom paperwork, custom legal, infosec reviews, etc. Like we've always been okay with that. And our professional services team, we're definitely not building an agency again, but we are streets ahead. And we hear this from our customers all the time, streets ahead of the average kind of SaaS provider in the relationship building and hands-on support that we give. But it's so different to the agency or consulting world from our side. Running a PS team that can do that is so different to running an agency or consulting team. And I think that's because some of it comes from the business model, obviously the gross margins in software and those kinds of things. But some of it is just, I think our customers think of what we provide in a very different way to the way that brands think of what agencies bring. And legitimately, truly, it is different, but it manifests itself. I actually been meaning to write about the difference between the credentials deck that an agency puts together and the logos that we have on a SaaS website. Because I actually saw something on Twitter. Somebody was talking about the different tiers of quality of logo. It's like there's one person buried away deep inside this big organization who signed up for a trial once, all the way up to, the CEO loves it and it's strategically important and so forth. But, our logos on the SearchPilot site, for example, are all existing major, fully deployed current customers. And, that's not how agency creds ever work. It's like, oh yeah, we worked with that company once and we had a small project there and this one's a current customer, a current client, and this one's a current client. But it's just, and it's back to that retention, and long relationships that come from the different service offerings. But it's been quite eye-opening on my side to see, like, some of this stuff intellectually, but actually running the business is quite different.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it that much or in those terms around you're providing the services, the consulting in some ways that an agency would, but it's anchored in the software, SearchPilot itself. So actually going back to what I said previously, that agencies will deliver against the statement of work and kind of the deliverables and the tangible stuff, but that can change over time. But you have to kind of surround it with the services and the client services, the account management stuff. You're doing the same, but the thing it's based on is the software and
much more concrete, much more specific, and there's something different there, I think.
And not the expectation that it maybe changes too much over time,
that's
apart
true.
from new features and stuff like that. So I guess in some ways, so again from the agency perspective, you're almost constantly trying to think about, okay, what's next, what can we do better, that kind of stuff. And I'm sure at SearchPilot you do very similar, but it's rooted in really looking after the customer as opposed to the product itself. Like, for example, there's only so many ways to do a technical SEO audit, for example,
Right.
but you can
Right.
improve it and improve how you deliver it and how you implement it. And that's the intangible stuff. With Search Pilot, I guess you can concentrate a bit more on understanding the business and understanding the client, because you're not, the product is the product. If that makes
Well,
sense.
it's the focus thing, and again, you and I have talked about this before, but I was never brave enough or confident enough in the distilled era to really properly focus. We did SEO, but we did SEO for a wide range of verticals, industries, and whatever. And we didn't just do SEO, right? Even at our most focused, we were doing a range of things. And I think that's one thing that I've definitely sought to do differently. And I don't know if I don't know if I were to go back to the agency world, whether that extreme focus would be a benefit there. I suspect maybe it would be. Some of the people I've been most impressed by are people who've done extremely, extremely focused professional services businesses. And it's the same with the mission stuff. And again, you and I have the scar tissue of it's been much, much easier to define the mission and vision of Search Pilot than in a professional services business, where kind of ultimately, when it comes down to it, the mission is make the clients happy. And I always found it very difficult to kind of draw a boundary around that.
Yeah, and the challenge with the agency and what we found at Distilled is there's so much you can do, but also, ironically, I think when you're very good at one thing, the client is more likely to ask you to do other things.
Right.
And when you're running an agency, it's so hard to say no. It's so hard to stay focused on, no, sorry, we don't do that. Because, well, it's agency life, you kind of want
margins and retention and all the rest of it. Yeah.
So I think that definitely plays a part there. Whereas now, again, Search Pilot is Search Pilot. You're going to add new features, new improvements, improve how it works. But fundamentally, you know what it does, you know where it does its job best. Whereas with the agency, you can go in so many different directions.
So tempting to get stretched in those other areas.
From an in-house perspective, for those people listening who work in-house, like, yes, by all means, check with your agency if they can do other stuff, but be aware if it's not really their thing, that they might feel compelled to say yes, they may be under pressure to say yes, but definitely have that little bit of, I guess, due diligence around.
Look for their areas of brilliance. Yeah, like, is this what
exactly.
you're best at? Is kind of, I think, how I'd be thinking about that. So, cool. We should kind of bring to an end and wrap up. I think final question from me is just, you have obviously got this deep experience going back many years of the agency side of things. You're working now with, I'm sure, a range of younger, energetic founders and across the board, and all kinds of people with different experiences from different walks of life. What have you been learning from them?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is that it makes me feel a bit better about my experience, that most problems are the same. The fundamental issues that agencies experience, they're mostly the same core issues. They just happen at different points of that agency's journey. For some, it might happen after a year or 2 years, or it might be 5 years. That can be the variable. So I've definitely learned that a lot of people struggle with the same kinds of things, and how you solve them is normally where the difference lies. And I think as well, the thing that I'm feeling and learning from them quite a bit is just, you are stuck in this cycle sometimes as an agency. Even the best agencies and the ones who I work with who are absolutely killing it, doing fantastic work, you still feel that pressure, that you still get into that cycle of, well, we need more, we need more, we need more. And that's quite eye-opening, because the agencies I'm working with who are doing amazing and the ones that are struggling a little bit, they're both kind of almost equally stressed about different things. And so it's like just different types of stress that manifest themselves different. I know which one I prefer, but it doesn't feel like that in the moment. It still feels difficult. So again, with in-house, I think that's just a dynamic to probably be aware of with agencies, that they do have that little bit of pressure. It's a really hard business model to make work, as you know. Like, it's, out of all the ones that we could have chosen, probably could have chosen an easier one from day one. And I think that's something to be aware of when you are a brand, that they work on multiple clients. They're always going to put slightly more junior people on the account as time goes on. That's kind of how the business model shapes things a little bit.
It has to work. Yeah, that's is interesting. It's the first line of the Search Pilot values is about enjoying the journey, because I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned is, yeah, like good times and bad times come and go, but in the moment you've always got problems, you've always got challenges, and you're always kind of fighting or struggling with something. And yeah, I think you're right. Agencies, it's a tough model, and for everybody who's in that side of things, I think they should definitely reach out to you for support. But that constant tension of having enough work to do, having enough people to do the work, and having the work be high enough standard is like constant whack-a-mole, and I don't think is solvable. Like, you just have to, that's just the job. That is just the thing that you're going to, that's what you're signing up for. The flip side is you can get started, you can grow it from a one-man band. You can start as a freelancer or a contractor and build this thing. You can start it with no capital, and without investors and all the rest of it. So it's definitely, it has its pros as well as its cons. But I said to someone the other day when we sold Distilled, and we were talking about the non-compete elements of the agreement, and our lawyers were saying, this looks quite strict and quite punchy, and we should definitely push back here. And Duncan and I were like, nah, we're good. It's okay. No intention of starting a competing agency.
It's fine. I've got enough cars.
This is okay. So anyway, on that note, good place to end. Paddy, where should people follow you if they want to hear more about your thoughts and keep up to date with everything that you're working on?
Fanderfocus.com is my agency services site, and on Paddy Moogan. There's not too many of us on LinkedIn if you want to search me on there as well. I'm pretty active on there.
Great stuff. It was a fun conversation. Good catching up with you, Paddy. Have a great rest of your day. Chat to you soon.
Likewise. Cheers.